Hello again at the Future Summit organized by Social Innovation Solutions. We are in a panel with Mr. Danny Go, CEO at Nexus FrontierTech, and Jonathan Weiss, CEO at HealthEngine. Hello, sir, and welcome.
Thank you.
Please tell me your first thoughts on the Future Summit.
This is my first event at this Future Summit. It's quite interesting to see the vibes of the entrepreneur coming on stage to pitch their ideas, as I've never really enjoyed the startup ecosystem over here. I've always thought that Romania's technical talent are very strong. I haven't really come to, understanding the idea that putting the technology into an idea to make it work. Except for, of course, UiPath that we have all known.
Yeah,
about.
everybody had.
Yeah. So that's basically my first impression so far.
Mr. Weiss, please.
I'm very impressed with it. It's brought together not only entrepreneurs and leaders, but also the next generation who are pitching, and I think it's got good cross-pollination aspects there, where people can meet and network, which is always important. It shouldn't just be a didactic lecturing on entrepreneurship, if that can even be done, but experiential.
It is always all these kinds of events are perfect for networking and meeting people and meeting new ideas.
Right.
The entrepreneurship, especially in technology, is I think growing a lot in the past few years, has grown a lot, and it's still growing. Why do you think is that? Are we more technical? Are we more digitized?
Well, I think technology, in terms of entrepreneurship, has opened up the pathway for more people with less capital to take ideas, see them to at least minimally viable product, and then get those out there to test them and figure out fast what works, what doesn't, as opposed to, you go back 20, 30 years ago, it was a big deal and effort to try and get a team together, get a product together, and then get that out into the marketplace. And so it's democratized, I think, innovation.
Is it the technology that changes us, or are we changing the technology?
Both. I think. I think
That
we
is
react, and it's sort of a cycle. We look at how we can improve our lives, and then once we've seen it, I mean, someone mentioned earlier today, before the iPhone, we didn't know we needed it. Now, when the iPhone came out, you saw platforms emerge from that, and a whole host and array of things built on the back of it. So
and the huge ecosystem of
Right.
apps. Mr. Go, I know you are building AI algorithms. What exactly for, and what are the use of it? How do you use it?
At the moment, we basically build algorithms to put into organizations' operations to basically extract and utilize their existing data to make into automation. Usually in the early stage of a technology, the early adopters are always on the top of the pyramid, usually large organizations, for them to actually utilize and provide to the masses. And that's how usually the best way for technology to push it out. But reflecting of what Jonathan just mentioned, the change in the last 10, 20 years, for me, I feel the main difference is corporations and investment capital are starting to realize that this change does not only come from top to down. They are starting to see all these large enterprises like Google, Facebook are actually changing from the bottom, and they are more willing to take the risk with younger entrepreneurs, with entrepreneurs that has idea coming from the crowd. And with these, of course, influxes of all these large capitals to support the dream of this entrepreneur, the ideas are starting to flourish, and you are starting to see a lot more success stories from there. Although I still feel there's still a long way to go to really make this. I mean, we are always talking about startup, and we have been starting to hear a little bit about the scale up in the last 2 years. and all this, how to actually move from a startup to a scale up to actually a real corporations. That is still a $1 million question that we're all
That is also interesting because we are still debating what startup means. If you are 5 years in, are you still a startup or you should be scaling up your business? How is that? When do we stop? It's not necessarily ours, but it's interesting. When do we?
Never. The minute you stop
Please, you do, Mike.
viewing
You do.
yourself as on the precipice of either success or failure, you become too ingrained in your own processes, and you turn around and there's people disrupting you. So you've got to, I think, always have this feeling of imperative to outdo yourself and react, or else you're going to be the next dinosaur on the block.
In terms of technology, what I know it's affecting and it's changing our lives in every aspect, in any aspect. And yet, there are sectors that are more prone to change than others. Which one do you think is going to be the first to see a huge difference in the way it's doing?
Well, we've seen it. We've seen consumer-orientated businesses, and also some on the B2B side, that simplify lives or processes or reduce costs. We just had a panel on healthcare, which is the world I come from. That's a slower approach because there's necessarily a lot of asymmetry of information. The patient isn't truly always a consumer, if ever. They're not the ones that are self-diagnosing and self-treating. And so you've got a lot of stakeholders that need to be brought around to the adoption curve, and that takes a bit longer.
The healthcare, just a second. The healthcare, the health system, it's one of, as far as I can see it in Romania, it's one of the places where you have people that are resisting change. It's one of those systems that are truly sometimes rejecting, and they still want to have control of all the doxes and everything.
Yeah.
How do you convince them to change?
It's hard. First of all, education of consumers, again, unless you're talking about wellness aspects in life, which people can be proactive and sort of embrace. If you're talking about the services or the acute medical services side, it's more difficult. People aren't out there looking to learn about this unless they need it, and they hope they don't need it.
Yeah.
So when they find out, they're often at the mercy, and that's what I mean about asymmetry of information, with someone who's trained, and they themselves, the physicians, are often disintermediated from the patients because they work for a system that requires their own demands, and you get this disconnect between the doctor and the patient. So there's a lot of stakeholders at play, and there's a lot of money. Healthcare is sort of an inelastic good. When you need it, you're going to sacrifice everything else purchasing, and that puts you in a position where you're often helpless, and it's big money, at least in the States and other systems that have different types of dysfunction. But when you include the economic imperative, you get a lot of misalignment, which is what we work on in the States for HealthEngine.
Mr. Gao, please tell me which sector do you think is going to be the most changed? Most
I actually operate a VC in Southeast Asia that we invest in probably about close to 30 portfolios in the last 5 years. As a technologist, I come from a technology background that understands the AI technology, but we always have the questions of which industry is the best to invest in, or which industry can best use the technology to innovate, to change in the masses. As of this moment, we are still going with the trend where there are two factors. One is where the LPs are interested in, our investors into the fund. They are usually large corporate in their own industry, whether it's coming from healthcare or coming from a public sector or vice versa. The second is, where can you actually then go and find the talents, verging the the both business talent and the technical talents to create the solutions together. So my answer would be, in the last few years, we see a lot of the O2O in maybe 3-4 years ago, especially on this e-commerce trend, now down to now into a lot more specific of, yes, healthcare solution, like Babylon in the UK raised about £250 million, into financial fintech sector, that is revolutionizing the industry. I mean, you can open a bank account sitting at your home in 10 minutes rather than going to the bank, wait for a bank account for 2 weeks. So this is, you can see the real benefit in a big change, and that prompts the consumers to start asking, why did I do that? Why did I have to? And that's starting to change the perception of the consumer to say that, yes, the technology is really changing them, and back is a circle back to the LP of the VC to start seeing that, yeah, this is what we like to see. We are starting to using the propaganda of the consumer to actually support what we are doing in the whole organization, and also taking the change to help us to move as well.
I was thinking about UiPath, the automation of pretty much any kind of processes, because you can basically automate many things. So when, as they are going now, they are not targeting one specific sector, but they are trying to do that in all the industries where you can actually implement such a thing. So are we seeing, because that's my feeling at least, we are seeing a digitization that it's slowly taking over pretty much every aspect of our life, and we are not even realizing it.
I think we again, from the VC point of view, we see this as there are two types of startups. One is solving horizontal problem, which is like UiPath. They have very specific, unique technology that can apply across different industry. And the other one is more on the horizontal solutions, where they are very specific into health tech, ed tech, fintech, regtech, insurtech, to really use their domain sector to really solve the problem. Just like, and it differentiates by, I always call it the onboarding time and cost. For UiPath, because it targets every industry, it still needs a bit of time to actually understand the client's industry and customize to make it work. The good thing, of course, is it can apply to every single industry. But for those very specific industry, you see a lot of vertical startups that, coming into this automation industry. And what they say is, we have a platform, it takes you 5 minutes to get on board of it. And that's what some industry, especially like legal industry, are prone to follow that type of pathway rather than solving the basic problems of them. Like in finance industry, they do not prefer a ready platform. They prefer a much more customized solution. So again, it depends on industry, but there are different startups coming from different angles, solving the same problem. It depends on how long you can actually adopt it. How well do you adopt it into the deep of the organization?
But I think, well, at least as the fintech goes, they are truly changing the way we interact with the banking system. But they are not really changing the banking system, because that one remains in place. It's the same one that we had 20 years ago, 50 years ago. The banks are there, and we are using them. They are changing on the business to consumer end of the interface and all those services. How is it on healthcare? Because one way or another, is it the same? We are changing the interface that the people use, or can we say we can go inside?
It's, in terms of the consumer, once again, it's a tough one, because it's not a consumable service, so to speak.
That's true.
In rare opportunities, it might be if you're looking for cosmetics or, LASIK surgery or IVF. The other components of this is, it happens to you and you're sort of, as I say, the deer in the headlights. So you're not really engaged. You don't want to be remote from a platform. You want to be hand-to-hand with your clinical choice partner, those you trust, to help shepherd you through it, because that's what their expertise is. Most people aren't I mean, we've all used banking for years. The engagement may have changed, but for healthcare, it's an uncertain event. When it happens, it's got its own peculiarities. So on the backside of that, when you're looking at the clinical services, that changes at the level of research and safety concerns. So it's convincing stakeholders like clinicians that are practicing first do no harm or be safe as possible. It's tough to get them to really engage on that, I'd say, from a tech focus standpoint.
Actually, I agree on what you just said. Is for healthcare industry, it's quite different. It involves a lot more clinical trial research. That the factors of the success of the research is greater than the applications of what you can actually put into somebody's body. Whereas in the banking industry, where I come from, what is a bank? It's just basically a service sector. The rules are preset by human beings, by regulators. And the reason why you see the sectors flourish in the last few years is simply because the regulators are starting to realize that, yeah, we can change. I mean, how can you approve a bank to open a bank account in under 10 minutes without actually taking, let's say, the bank statement, credit card, identity card? How can you do that? It's because they open the green light for them to do it. And the biggest difference is this one does not involve human life.
Right.
It's easier for people to change as long as the regulators, the providers come into a certain agreement, we can provide a service. It's preset, determined by human beings. Whereas in healthcare,
It's a nature-driven
it's
construct.
totally different. The technology is only assisting.
Right.
The rules are set by the research, the real fact of whether can these drugs treat somebody.
And the ever-changing understanding of the human physiology,
Yes.
pathophysiology.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I can bank from thousands of miles away. It's a virtual experience. Healthcare's
Yeah.
local. I can't virtualize my appendectomy. I've got to go into a place physically, and somebody's got to prep me and put a scalpel to my skin.
I have seen technologies that allows us to operate robots from
In some,
thousands of kilometers
in
away.
some respects, yes.
It might be,
But the
might
delivery
be a
will always
solution.
be where the patient is.
Yes.
Whereas
Definitely.
my finance or my law firm
Yeah.
could be around the world, and
Can
my
be.
bank can be anywhere.
That's true. Healthcare, it's local all the
you've-
time.
The delivery is to the individual directly, not in the technosphere.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to differentiate is healthcare, you are really doing something. It's like manufacturing.
Right.
A bank, what is
Yes.
a bank? It's nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have physical things to do. You don't really hand your cash to a bank and then to take the cash out. You transact through credit
Yeah.
cards, through transactions. It's
Right.
totally different.
It's all zeros and
Yeah.
ones.
Okay, gentlemen, this was a very interesting talk. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.